"He taught me," Marcus said to the assembled mourners, "that we are never truly homeless when we have our honor, never truly poor when we have our integrity, and never truly invisible when we have the courage to stand for what matters." Thomas Chen was a warrior to his last breath, and his final mission was as important as any combat operation he ever led. He reminded me who I was when I'd forgotten. He gave me back my purpose when I thought I had none. Rest in peace, Command Sergeant Major. Your mission is complete. At the burial in Arlington National Cemetery, a 3-volley salute echoed across the graves of thousands of other warriors. As the American flag was carefully folded and presented to Thomas's sister, his only surviving relative, Marcus Washington, stood at attention in his dress uniform, the Medal of Honor prominently displayed on his chest, a final salute to the man who'd never stopped fighting. For those who'd fought for their country, the crowd dispersed slowly, veterans embracing, sharing stories of Thomas Chen, creating a living memorial through the memories they'd carry forward. As the sun set over Arlington, casting long shadows across the white headstones, Marcus remained behind, standing at attention beside the fresh grave. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for not walking past, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for reminding me that we're more than our worst moments, more than our struggles, more than what others see on the surface. I'll carry your lesson forward. I promise. I'll teach others to look deeper, to see the warriors hidden in plain sight, to never dismiss someone based on appearance. Your mission continues through all of us. Rest well, Command Sergeant Major. You've earned your place among heroes." And in the growing darkness, if you'd been watching closely, you might have seen something remarkable. Dozens of small lights appearing across the cemetery as veterans who'd known Thomas, who'd served with him, who'd been helped by him, placed small candles on nearby graves, creating a constellation of memory and honor that illuminated the night. Because that's what warriors do. They remember, they honor, they carry forward the legacy of those who served before them. And they never, ever walk past someone in need without seeing them. Really seeing them, as Thomas Chen had taught them. The homeless veteran on the corner might be someone's guardian angel, waiting patiently for their mission to begin. The story of Thomas Chen and Marcus Washington became part of military lore, told and retold in barracks and training centers, a reminder that the warrior ethos doesn't end with retirement, that the bonds formed in combat last a lifetime, and that sometimes the most important missions are the ones we choose for ourselves. Years later, when Thomas William Chen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, his funeral was attended by hundreds of veterans. Marcus Washington gave the eulogy, speaking through tears about the man who'd sat on a cold street corner for 2 weeks just to find the right moment to change a young veteran's life. Marcus Washington would go on to become a powerful advocate for veterans' rights. The Medal of Honor gave him a platform and credibility that opened doors previously closed. He'd testify before Congress about the failures in the VA system. He'd start a nonprofit to help veterans navigate disability claims. He'd speak at military bases about the invisible wounds of war and the importance of seeking help. And every time he told his story, he'd begin with the day he sat on hospital steps, defeated and hopeless, until a man he'd dismissed as just another homeless veteran had revealed himself to be his guardian angel, his connection to a past he'd tried to forget, and his bridge to a future worth fighting for. Thomas returned to his apartment that evening, hung up his army jacket, and looked at the wall where he'd hung photographs and mementos from 35 years of service. He added one more item, a photograph that the hospital journalist had given him, showing the moment when Marcus had opened the metal box, the look of pure shock and emotion on his face. Beside that photo, Thomas placed a handwritten note that Marcus had sent him a week later. It read simply, "You taught me that warriors don't stop being warriors just because they take off the uniform. You taught me that one person with enough determination can cut through any amount of bureaucracy. You taught me that I'm still worth something. Thank you for the medal. Thank you more for believing in me. Your grateful comrade, Marcus." Thomas sat in his modest living room, a cup of coffee in his hands, and smiled. The mission was complete. The warrior could rest. Across the city on that same corner of 5th and Main Street, thousands of people continued to pass by every day, rushing to their important meetings and appointments. never noticing the small memorial plaque that had been placed on the building wall. It read, "On this corner, a warrior waited patiently to honor another warrior. May we all have the patience to see the heroes hidden in plain sight. November 2023. And occasionally someone would stop to read the plaque. They'd pause in their rush. They'd think about the homeless people they passed every day without really seeing. They'd wonder about the stories hidden beneath the surface, of the human beings they'd dismissed as invisible. Some would even drop a few dollars in the donation box that had been placed beneath the plaque, funds that went directly to local veteran services. Not much maybe, but something. A recognition that every person has a story, every person has value, and that sometimes the most important heroes are the ones we almost walk past without noticing." As Thomas walked away, leaving Marcus holding the Medal of Honor and staring after him in amazement, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This had been his final mission, the last unfinished piece of business from a long military career. He'd started with that photograph, that image of a young, terrified private who'd shown extraordinary courage, and he'd ended with a man who needed to be reminded of his own strength. The story would hit the news within days. A journalist working at the hospital had noticed the encounter and, sensing something significant, had discreetly photographed Thomas handing the medal box to Marcus. The photos would go viral. Homeless veteran turns out to be retired general, waiting to present Medal of Honor, the headlines would read, though they'd get some details wrong in their rush to publish the feel-good story. Thomas William Chen was not actually a general. He'd retired as a command sergeant major, but the story's essence was true. An old soldier had refused to let bureaucracy prevent a young soldier from receiving the recognition he'd earned. An old warrior had found one last mission and completed it. "I wanted to meet you as one veteran to another, not as some general in dress blues making a formal presentation. I wanted you to see that struggles don't define us, that circumstances can make anyone appear broken, but that beneath the surface we're all still warriors. I wanted you to understand that this medal isn't just a piece of metal. It's a recognition of who you are at your core." Marcus took the box from Thomas's hands with shaking fingers. He stared at the Medal of Honor, tears flowing freely now. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. This medal comes with benefits. The government provides a monthly pension to Medal of Honor recipients, separate from your disability benefits. It's not a fortune, but it will help while you're fighting the VA bureaucracy. More than that, there are resources available to Medal of Honor recipients, including priority access to VA care." "I don't know what to say," Marcus whispered. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep going. Keep fighting. Keep being the man who refused to leave a comrade behind, even when everyone else said it was hopeless. The military may have retired you from active duty, but you're still a soldier where it counts." Thomas tapped his chest, over his heart. They sat together on those hospital steps for another hour. Thomas told Marcus stories about the mission that had brought them together, filling in details that Marcus had never known. He told him about James Rodriguez, who Thomas had tracked down 2 years ago and who'd been overwhelmed with gratitude to learn that the young private who'd saved his life was finally being recognized. "Rodriguez wanted to be here for this," Thomas said. "But he's elderly now, not in good health. He asked me to tell you that not a day goes by that he doesn't thank God for you, his grandchildren, 2 beautiful girls. They exist because you refused to give up. That's your legacy, Marcus. That's what this medal represents." Eventually, Thomas stood to leave. But before he did, he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a business card. "This is my information, my real information. I told you I'm not actually homeless. I have an apartment, I have resources, and I have connections to people who can help you navigate the VA system properly. Call me. Let me help you get what you've earned." Marcus stood too, and without a word he pulled Thomas into a fierce hug. "Thank you. I don't just mean for the medal. Thank you for not giving up on me, for tracking me down, for caring enough to sit on a street corner for 2 weeks just to find the right moment to approach me. Thank you for your service, Sergeant Washington. Thank you for being the kind of soldier that makes an old ranger proud." Thomas reached into his jacket, and this time, he pulled out what he'd been protecting so carefully all these weeks. It was a small blue velvet box, the kind that the military uses for significant medals. He opened it carefully, revealing the medal inside. It was the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. Its distinctive light blue ribbon and 5-pointed Star unmistakable even to someone who'd never seen one in person. Marcus stared at it in shock. Why do you have that? Is that yours? No, Thomas said softly. This medal belongs to you. What, that's impossible. I haven't done anything worthy of the Medal of Honor. I was just a private doing my job. Marcus, do you know what happened after that mission? James Rodriguez survived his injuries. He recovered, returned to duty, and went on to serve another 8 years in the Army. He got married, had 2 kids. Those kids have kids now. Rodriguez's entire family exists because you refused to give up on him, because you insisted he was alive even when everyone else had written him off, because you inspired a burned-out Ranger team leader to go back one more time into danger. But that still doesn't explain the Medal of Honor, Marcus said, though his voice was shaking. After we extracted Rodriguez, I filed a report recommending you for the Medal of Honor, not just for your actions during the ambush, where you held your position under withering fire and protected 3 wounded soldiers, but for your absolute refusal to leave Rodriguez behind even when you yourself were critically injured. The Medal of Honor is awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty. For displaying extraordinary valor in the face of enemy action. You displayed that, Marcus. You embodied the warrior ethos. You never left a fallen comrade. But I never received any medal, Marcus protested weakly. I know. Your case got lost in the system for years. By the time it worked its way through the bureaucracy, you'd left your first unit, and nobody could locate you for the award ceremony. The medal sat in a Pentagon office waiting for you. When I retired 5 years ago, I heard about your case from a friend who worked in awards and decorations. He mentioned this Medal of Honor that had been approved but never presented because the recipient had disappeared into the system. Thomas paused, gathering his thoughts. I made it my mission to find you. It took me 2 years of following dead ends and filing Freedom of Information requests. I finally tracked you down 3 months ago. I learned you were living here in D.C., that you'd been medically retired after your last deployment, that you were struggling with the VA system and the transition to civilian life, and I decided that you needed to receive this medal, not in some impersonal Pentagon ceremony, but in a way that mattered. So you pretended to be homeless? You sat on that street corner for 2 weeks waiting for me? Marcus sounded incredulous. Marcus looked confused. I didn't do anything. I was evacuated to the field hospital. Not right away. There was a delay in the medevac. While you were waiting, bleeding from wounds in your leg and shoulder, you saw that one of your fallen squad members, Specialist James Rodriguez, wasn't with the bodies being prepared for transport. Everyone assumed he'd been killed in the initial explosion, his body lost or destroyed, but you insisted, even in your condition, that Rodriguez had been alive when you last saw him, that he'd taken cover behind a wall about 50 meters from the ambush point. Marcus's eyes widened as the memory clearly came back to him. I remember shouting at everyone, telling them they had to go back for Rodriguez. But I passed out from blood loss before anyone listened. They didn't listen, Thomas said quietly. Your platoon had already taken heavy casualties. Command decided it was too dangerous to send another team back into the kill zone for what they believed was a body recovery. But I heard you shouting. I saw the determination in your eyes, the absolute certainty that your friend was alive. So I made a decision. I took 2 members of my team and we went back. And you found him, Marcus whispered. We found him. He'd been hit by shrapnel, trapped under rubble, unable to move or call for help. If we'd waited even another hour, he would have died from blood loss and shock. Your insistence, your refusal to leave a man behind even when you were critically wounded yourself, that saved his life. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now. I never knew. Nobody ever told me you went back. I asked about Rodriguez at the hospital, but they said he was KIA. Then I got transferred to Germany for surgery, and by the time I returned to duty, I was assigned to a different unit. I never found out what happened to him. Different war, different circumstances, but the same feeling of being lost after the military. It's hard. How'd you end up? Marcus gestured vaguely at Thomas's appearance, the obvious implication being, how did a decorated veteran end up homeless on the streets? Thomas smiled slightly. That's a longer story than we have time for right now. But Marcus, I want to talk to you about something important. Marcus's eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? Because I've been looking for you. For 2 weeks, I've been sitting on that corner, waiting for you to walk past so I could approach you at the right moment. Now Marcus looked alarmed, his hand instinctively moving to his hip, where he probably still habitually expected to find a sidearm. Are you stalking me? Is this some kind of scam? Nothing like that, Thomas assured him quickly. Marcus, do you remember serving in Iraq in 2007 near Ramadi? Marcus's expression shifted from alarm to confusion. Yeah, that was my first deployment. I was barely 19. Green as hell, why? Do you remember a mission in August of that year? A patrol that went wrong, where your convoy got ambushed. Marcus's face went pale. His hand started shaking slightly. I don't like talking about that. I know, and I'm sorry to bring it up. But Marcus, I was there. I was the Ranger team leader that extracted your unit after the ambush. You probably don't remember me, it was chaos. You were wounded, everything was happening so fast. Recognition slowly dawned in Marcus's eyes. Wait, there was a Ranger team. They came out of nowhere, laid down covering fire, pulled us out. They saved, his voice cracked. They saved my life. 3 of my squad members died in that ambush. But I survived because of that extraction. You survived because you kept your head, you stayed calm under fire, and you protected your wounded squad members until help arrived. Thomas corrected gently. I read the after-action report. Your squad leader recommended you for a Bronze Star, though I don't know if it ever got approved in the bureaucracy. It didn't, Marcus said quietly. It got lost in paperwork, and by the time anyone noticed, my squad leader had been killed in another operation, and nobody else wanted to push it through. Thomas nodded, not surprised. He'd seen it happen before. Good soldiers performing heroically under impossible circumstances, only to have their recognition lost in administrative chaos. Marcus, I need to tell you something. After that mission, after we extracted your unit, my team and I returned to the ambush site to secure it and recover the fallen. While we were there, you did something that my team talked about for years afterward. Then Marcus did something that made Thomas sit up straighter with concern. The young sergeant walked to the edge of the hospital steps and sat down heavily, his head in his hands, his whole body language screaming defeat and despair. It was a posture Thomas had seen before too many times, in too many soldiers who'd reached their breaking point. Thomas made a decision. He stood from his bench, checked one more time that the item inside his jacket was secure, and crossed the street toward the hospital. Marcus didn't notice him approaching until Thomas was standing right in front of him. When he did look up, his expression cycled through annoyance, then dismissal, then something like resignation. I don't have any money, Marcus said flatly. If you're looking for a handout, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm not looking for money, Thomas said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed at odds with his appearance. Marcus looked at him more closely now, taking in the army jacket, the military bearing that no amount of street living could completely erase. You serve? 35 years, Army Rangers, Thomas said simply. Something in Marcus's expression shifted slightly, a small crack in his defensive wall. There was a brotherhood among veterans, an understanding that civilians couldn't fully grasp. Thank you for your service, Marcus said automatically. The phrase everyone said, the phrase that meant everything and nothing. May I sit? Thomas asked, gesturing to the spot beside Marcus on the steps. Marcus shrugged, which Thomas took as permission. He lowered himself carefully onto the concrete, setting his duffel bag beside him. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 veterans from different generations, different wars, but somehow part of the same continuum of service and sacrifice. Rough appointment? Thomas asked eventually. Marcus laughed bitterly. That obvious, huh? Yeah, rough appointment. Actually, rough everything. I got injured on my last deployment, took shrapnel in my leg and back. Doctors say I'll heal, but it takes time. Army medically retired me, which I get. But now I'm just stuck. Can't do the job I trained for. Can't go back to my unit. Can't even get the VA to approve my disability claim without jumping through 1,000 hoops. I've been waiting 4 months just for a rating decision. You have people helping you navigate the system? Thomas asked. I have a lawyer, but he's free. Court appointed, which means he has about 200 other cases. I have a caseworker at the VA, but she's burned out and overwhelmed. I have my family, but they don't understand the military system, and honestly, I don't want to burden them with my problems. Marcus stopped, seeming surprised at how much he'd just shared with a stranger. Sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands, Thomas said gently. I've been where you are. But what nobody on that street corner knew, what nobody could see beneath the layers of worn clothing and the appearance of defeat, was that Thomas Chen was not actually homeless. He had an apartment, modest but clean, about 3 miles from where he currently sat. He had a pension that provided enough to live on. He had savings from his years of service. He had everything he needed to live a comfortable, quiet retirement. So why was he here, sitting on a cold concrete corner, pretending to be destitute? The answer walked past him at approximately 9:45 a.m. Sergeant First Class Marcus Washington was 32 years old. Tall and powerfully built, with the bearing of a man who'd spent his adult life in military service. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a leather jacket, but everything about the way he carried himself screamed military training. He walked with purpose, heading toward the VA hospital 6 blocks away, where he had a follow-up appointment. For injuries sustained during his last deployment, Marcus had the particular look of a combat veteran struggling with the transition back to civilian life. His eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, always alert for threats. His jaw was tight with barely controlled tension. His hands, when they weren't shoved in his pockets, clenched and unclenched in a rhythmic pattern that suggested anxiety, perhaps PTSD. Like everyone else that morning, Marcus walked past Thomas without really seeing him. Just another homeless vet. Just another casualty of a system that didn't always take care of its own. Marcus had his own problems to deal with, his own demons to fight. He didn't have the emotional bandwidth to take on someone else's struggles. But Thomas saw him. Thomas had been watching for him specifically, had been sitting on this corner every day for the past 2 weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. His pale blue eyes tracked Marcus's progress down the street with the intensity of a hawk watching prey, except there was no predatory intent in his gaze, only recognition and purpose. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered photograph, protected in a plastic sleeve that had clearly seen better days. He looked at the photo for a long moment, comparing the image to the man who'd just walked past. The photograph showed 2 soldiers in combat gear, standing in what appeared to be an Iraqi village. The older soldier, identifiable as a younger version of Thomas despite the decades between then and now, had his arm around a much younger soldier, practically a kid who wore the insignia of a private first class. That young soldier was Marcus Washington, though the Marcus in the photograph looked like a different person entirely. Younger, hopeful, not yet carrying the weight that the current Marcus clearly bore. A young woman in yoga clothes, carrying a green smoothie and scrolling through her phone, walked past so close that her designer purse nearly knocked over Thomas's coffee cup. A styrofoam container that held the lukewarm remains of gas station coffee, the only thing he'd consumed since yesterday afternoon. She never looked up from her screen. A group of college students, laughing and joking about last night's party, gave Thomas a wide berth, as if homelessness might be contagious, as if acknowledging his presence might obligate them to do something they'd rather not think about. But Thomas Chen didn't react to any of this with anger or resentment. He simply watched, patient as a man who'd learned long ago that patience was sometimes the only weapon you had. His hand occasionally reached up to touch something under his army jacket, a gesture so subtle that nobody noticed, checking to make sure it was still there, still safe. Around 9 a.m., a little girl, maybe 6 years old, broke away from her mother's grasp and ran up to Thomas before her mother could stop her. The girl, with bright, curious eyes and pigtails bouncing, looked at Thomas without any of the fear or disgust that adults often showed. "Are you a real soldier?" she asked, pointing at his army jacket. Thomas's weathered face softened into a gentle smile. "I was a long time ago, little one. My uncle is a soldier. He's in Afghanistan." The girl said this with the pride that only children can muster for family, members they admire. "Then your uncle is very brave," Thomas said quietly. "You tell him thank you for his service when you see him." The girl's mother finally caught up, grabbing her daughter's hand with barely concealed panic. "I'm so sorry," she said to Thomas. Though whether she was apologizing for her daughter's behavior or for Thomas's existence was unclear, she pulled the girl away quickly. "Mommy, why doesn't that soldier have a house?" The girl's voice carried back as they disappeared into the crowd. The mother's response was lost in the noise of the city, but Thomas could imagine what it was. Some variation of he made bad choices, or he didn't try hard enough, or any of the comfortable lies that people told themselves to explain why some people ended up on the streets, while others thrived. The truth, as always, was far more complicated. Thomas William Chen had indeed been a soldier. Not just any soldier, but a decorated Army Ranger who'd served 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Desert Storm, and 1 in Iraq before officially retiring with 35 years of service. He'd earned 2 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, and a Purple Heart. He'd led men through hell and brought most of them home alive. He'd made decisions that saved lives and decisions that haunted his dreams. He'd been the kind of soldier that the Army held up as an example, the kind of leader that young officers aspired to become. The corner of 5th and Main Street in downtown Washington, D.C. had seen thousands of people pass by every single day for decades. Business professionals in sharp suits rushing to important meetings. Tourists with cameras and maps trying to find the Smithsonian. Government workers grabbing coffee before heading to their offices in nearby federal buildings. College students with backpacks hurrying to class. Parents with strollers navigating the crowded sidewalks. And sitting on that same corner, on a worn piece of cardboard next to a faded green duffel bag, was a man everyone simply walked past without a second glance. His name was Thomas William Chen, though nobody on that busy street corner knew that. To the thousands of people who passed him daily, he was just another homeless veteran, one of the countless invisible souls that big. Cities seemed to accumulate in their forgotten corners. He appeared to be in his 60s, though the hard life of the streets made it difficult to judge accurately. His face was weathered and lined, with a scraggly gray beard that hadn't seen a barber in months. He wore layers of mismatched clothing, a faded army jacket over a torn sweater over what might have once been a dress shirt. His pants were held up with a piece of rope. His boots, military issue but ancient and cracked, had holes in the soles. Beside him was a hand-lettered cardboard sign that read, "Homeless Veteran. Anything helps, God bless." The same generic message seen on street corners across America, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss as just another panhandler's plea. What made Thomas different from other panhandlers was his demeanor. He didn't aggressively ask for money. He didn't shake a cup or call out to passers-by. He simply sat there, back straight despite the obvious discomfort of sitting on concrete for hours, with an almost military bearing that most people were too rushed to notice. His eyes, pale blue and sharp despite his apparent circumstances, watched the crowd with a peculiar intensity, as if he was looking for something specific, or perhaps someone specific. On this particular November morning, cold and overcast with the threat of rain in the air, Thomas had been sitting in his usual spot since dawn. He'd been there when the street cleaners made their rounds at 5 a.m. He'd been there when the early commuters started, trickling through at 6. Now at 8:30 the morning rush was in full swing, and hundreds of people flowed past him like water around a stone in a stream. A businessman in an expensive suit nearly stepped on Thomas's outstretched hand as he rushed past, phone pressed to his ear, discussing quarterly earnings with someone who apparently needed to hear about it at high volume. The man didn't even glance down, didn't register Thomas's existence at all.